Hi, I'm Abby and this is my channel, and today I'm going to show you how to make homemade pasta. It's a pretty simple process, but it does take some time and a little bit of work. But I already washed my hands and I'm going to put on an apron because it can get messy with the flour, and the dough can get kind of sticky before we get it the consistency we want. So I like to be prepared just to stay clean. Now it is pretty simple to make pasta. It just takes a little bit of work, like I said. Today I will be making egg pasta. If you are a vegan or vegetarian and you don't want to use eggs, you can do the same thing just with water instead of eggs. It's basically the two types of pasta you can make. You would just do it a little bit opposite of what I'm doing. I'm going to put the eggs in first and then the flour. When you're doing water-based pasta, you want to put in the flour first and then your water. So for my batch, I'm going to take 3 eggs and just crack them open and take the yolks. Now you can use more or less eggs depending on how much pasta you make, but usually I go with 3. It's a good amount for having a good amount of pasta. Set those to the side. I'm just gonna take a fork and whisk them up. Kind of like if you were making scrambled eggs. You don't want to keep the yolks all whole. We get them nice and mixed. We're gonna just set that fork to the side. And then I also like to put this in a bowl to keep it kind of contained, to not make a big mess, but I know people who just do it right on their counter. And then also I use a rubber spatula to really mix in the flour. If you use a different type of spatula, the the dough can eventually stick to it and it gets a little hard. So I don't usually measure out my flour. I just kind of go until it gets to the right consistency. But the general rule is 1 per egg that you use is 100 grams of flour. I don't know what that is not in grams, but it's 100 grams per egg. Like I said earlier, if you don't want to use eggs, I would measure out your flour first and then add in water. I want to say it's a little less flour, or a little less flour for the same amount of water. But I'm just going to start by dumping in a good amount, not too much, and then I'm going to start mixing it. And slowly the dough is going to form, and you can slowly add. I would not dump in a bunch of flour at a time after this, but slowly add it in until you get the consistency you want. Most pastas, you want it to be not tacky to the touch, but not sticky where it sticks to everything, because you are going to have to run it through to like flatten it out. You're going to have to run it through a machine, and you don't want it to stick to the machine. You can always add more flour. I'm just going to add some more, go a little less this time in the pour. But I like to use a rubber spatula because it is easy to get the dough off once when it is sticky, but also it can really scrape the sides compared to like a metal or a wooden one. As you can see, the dough is really starting to form. It still is a little too sticky, but it is getting there, so we want to make sure we don't add too much flour. It is better to add more flour than water or egg. We aren't going to add more egg, but you can always leave excess flour out. If you are making it water, you really want to be careful with how much water you add, because it can look like it needs a lot and you add too much, and you're gonna have to, your dough just keeps growing and growing. So this time I just want to like sprinkle a little more flour over the dough. And there's a point you're gonna reach where you're gonna wanna have to take it out of the bowl and use your hands to really kind of start kneading it and adding it a little bit of flour at a time. This is why I washed my hands before, because I knew I would have to be touching the dough eventually. But you can see it's not sticking to the bowl as much. You can take it out, and I would spread first a little flour on your counter. Kind of lightly dust it. Some people, you know, just start mixing the dough on the counter, and so they don't have to do this transfer, but I think this keeps my counter a little cleaner since the dough is less sticky. You start working it and kneading it. And as you're kneading it, you can see that it picks up the flour you laid down. You can always add a little bit more at a time, just to really get the dough to the consistency that you want for pasta, where it doesn't really stick as much to you. Since I'm constantly adding flour, I like to keep the bag nearby. Even if you do measure out your flour beforehand, it's nice to keep the bag for, you know, your counter, so you can constantly keep it from sticking to things, is the main reason for the flour. And this is the part of the process that kind of takes the longest. This is where you're gonna have to really knead it, really spread that flour into the mixture to make sure it's all in there, instead of just the outside that's not tacky, that the whole dough is not sticking to anything. And this part is actually what keeps most people from making their homemade pasta, but this really isn't that bad of a part. Later, when you are rolling your dough through the machine, if you have an automatic machine, you can use that as your kneading instead of doing it by hand. But if you have a hand machine for flattening out your pasta, it's kind of about the same, so why not get a little workout in? So now that I've kneaded the dough for a while and it's getting to the consistency I want, you know, I can pull it apart and it still not be sticking to me. Just got like a little tackiness. We're gonna let the dough rest for 30 minutes and put it in some saran wrap, and we're just gonna let it rest for a bit. And while we're doing that, we can start cleaning up and get out our machine that we're gonna roll the dough in. We're just gonna set this out to the side. So we have let the dough rest, and you see I cleaned up things and I got out my mixer, which includes my pasta attachment. If you don't have a mixer or the attachment, they do sell very affordable ones that you attach to your counter, and they're hand rollers. Obviously that's a little more manual work. This will do it automatically for me. But either way, you can make it affordable, or, you know, go for the machine if you already own one. We're gonna take the pasta out of the saran wrap, and then I didn't put the flour away, but I have it over here because we're still gonna add some. I'm gonna lightly dust my counter and just kind of knead it a little bit more since it rested. And then since we do have a big amount of pasta, this is gonna, when we roll it out, then it's gonna get a lot, so we wanna break it up into pieces. You can easily do that by just ripping it apart, or you can get a knife and just easily cut it into more manageable sections. Cut it into fourths here. And while you're working with one piece, keep the other pieces in the saran wrap. It keeps them from drying out while you're working on that one piece. And just set those to the side. And you can knead this a little more and maybe add a little more flour if you need to. If you're using a machine that hooks to your counter as a hand crank machine, you might want to knead it mostly with your hands and then go in with the machine. But since I do have a mixer attachment, it will knead it for me. Right now I have it on its widest setting, which is number 1, and I'll roll the dough through that for a while. When you're rolling it, you can see, or kneading it, you can see that the dough will get lighter and lighter and maybe get a yellowish hue. That's totally fine. That's how it's supposed to look. I'm gonna turn mine on and my rollers are going. And I like to just make it a little kind of like flat pancake and just start rolling it through. And with this one, you'll roll it through the mixer. You just kind of let it fall through there and then fold it and send it through again. And you're gonna do this for a while until your pasta gets a little smoother. Right now it's a little kind of rough. You can sort of feel the different grooves and stuff. And this will, if you're doing it by hand, the kneading will help it a lot. But you can also do it through your roller. And if you notice it sticking to your roller, you can always add more flour. That's why I like to keep it out. And I did forget to say earlier, if you want to make wheat pasta, the same process. You're just going to do a portion of wheat flour compared to white flour. You're not going to do whole wheat flour. Your pasta will be pretty rough and it won't taste as good, just plain wheat flour, unless you like that. It's not to my flavor. But you're gonna keep folding your pasta and keep rolling it through, or if you're doing it by hand, just keep kneading it and start rolling it through. This is also another part where people don't like, especially if you're doing it by hand, because it does take a while and a little bit of work, but it can be fun. Just kind of constantly kneading it through the machine. I find it kind of relaxing. So now from the kneading and rolling it through the machine, you can see that it's gotten a lot lighter and it's a lot smoother. If I hold it up compared to the ones in the bag, it's definitely a lot whiter. These are more yellow. But what you're gonna do next is you're gonna keep your roller and you're just slowly gonna make it thinner and thinner until you get to the size that you want for your pasta. I usually stop at either the second or third to last size. I don't usually go to the last size just because it gets really thin and really long. While you're still in kind of like the thicker stages, you can still fold your pasta and then rerun it through. Every once in a while I'll run it a couple times in like the second to largest setting. But as you go smaller and smaller, you might just want to run it through once, maybe twice, but it will get smoother and longer. It's really kind of want to get your technique down and just kind of let it through, and then I like to hold my hand underneath. Don't really want to let the pasta go on top because it will slouch over the side and kind of stretch out when you don't want it to. You can see it's getting longer, and it's okay if it curls like that. You can easily smooth it out. Here I'm doing the third to last setting. I'm going to stop it here. I don't want to get it too thin or hard to handle. Once I got it to the thickness I want, I'm going to set it on my counter that has a little flour on it. I'm going to turn off the machine. And depending on if you have an attachment like this, it also comes with cutter attachments for spaghetti or fettuccine. And you can easily detach this one, put the cutter on. But I'll show you guys how to do it if you don't. If you have a hand roller and you don't have a cutter, I'll show you how to cut your pasta by hand. And you just want to lightly flour and just kind of spread on your pasta. This makes sure it doesn't stick together. Make sure you get both sides with the flour. This will easily come off when you cook the pasta. Just add a little, sprinkle along, kind of rub it in. Just make sure it doesn't stick together. And then if you want to hand cut it, you can just fold up your pasta. Since you have the flour, it's not going to really stick. I like to get a little roll like this. If you want really long pasta, keep it rolled up, but you're just going to take a sharp knife and just cut through, depending on how thin you want it or how thick you want it. And there you have it. You can break it up, you know, if you want shorter pieces, easily just tear it apart, or have your roll smaller. But you just cut your pasta real quick. And there you have your pasta made. You can either, you know, set this out to dry, you know, dry it out like you buy it in a box, it's dried out pasta. You can hang it and dry it out or set it out. You can immediately throw it into a boiling pot of water with salt and cook your pasta right away for eating it that day. It will only take like a couple minutes to cook, so don't keep it in there too long or it gets too hard. Or you can, once you have all your pasta cut, you can easily wrap it back up in saran wrap and put it in your freezer and keep it there for another 2 weeks. I wouldn't wait longer than that, or the eggs might get bad. If you have water pasta, it might last a little longer, but I wouldn't keep it in there too long. And there you have your pasta, and that's just a fourth of the dough we made. I still have the 3 others here. So you see it can make a good portion. You can make even a little more if you make it a little thinner. I stopped before the thinnest setting. But yeah, that is how you make homemade pasta. Much simpler than you think. Like this video if you plan on making your own pasta, or you liked this tutorial. Comment down below if you want to know how to make other things. If you want to learn how to make marinara sauce for your homemade pasta. Comment down below or like this video. And remember, if you want to be someone, why not be you? And I'll see you guys in the next video. Enjoy!